This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 FinTech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving FinTech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the FinTech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing FinTech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Breaking Banks Europe. This is episode 139, and this episode is all about the travel fintech momentum. So for anyone that knows me, you'll know that I absolutely love to travel. I've been to 38 different countries and counting. Travel runs in my blood, and I'm so incredibly excited to chat all things travel, fintech, innovation. We're even going to touch upon, Web3. We'll talk about buy now, pay later, insurance, and some of the innovations we're seeing and why fintech and travel are a match made in heaven. So I'm really excited to introduce our two guests today. We have Tania Ziegler from Booking.com. She's a senior partnership manager in the fintechs part of Booking.com, and Thomas Negrit at FlyWallet. He is the CEO and founder of FlyWallet. And FlyWallet is all about making travel affordable and sustainable with none other than Web3. So welcome both Tania and Thomas. It's so exciting to have you. Tania, let's start off with you. So who are you? I think most of our listeners know about Booking.com, but maybe kind of a quick kind of overview of what Booking.com is and what your role is kind of in this fintech part of Booking.com.
That sounds great. And thank you so much for having us. So my name is Tania, and I'm a senior partnerships manager here at Booking.com. And as many of you know, Booking.com is a travel and accommodation service company. We're online, and we're hailed out of Amsterdam. We've been running for nearly just over 26 years. And most recently, Booking.com has made a real investment into our financial technology business unit. So we have a fintech business unit that is now just over a year old. We've just celebrated our 1-year birthday very recently. And within the context of fintech and what I do at Booking.com, I focus on payment partnerships. So specifically, I focus on enabling financial technology payment solutions that can better travel and better e-commerce solutions. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Cool. Super. So that's really interesting. So you're kind of like the startup within the incumbent in this very new recent team.
That's a really good way of putting it. But we are definitely very purposeful and really quite serious about how we think about, financial technology and how it's going to make it better for not just our bookers, but also our partners.
Cool. Super. Thanks so much for joining us, Tania. And Thomas, so definitely more kind of on the startup, rather the incumbent side of things. And I think just, as soon as we hear, new technologies, everyone, I think, thinks of Web3 and how Web3 can really change the way things are done from the technological point of view. So Thomas, thanks so much for joining us. Who are you? Give us a bit more context around what you're doing and how Web3 is going to make a more kind of financially savvy and sustainable travel experience.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Meaghan, for hosting this space. And I'm really happy to be here. So I just really want to, first give a shout out to Matteo and Renata, for inviting me on this space. My name is Thomas Negrit. I'm a French and British national. I lived in the US for a while after college. Travel is also, I'm fond of travel, what I always say is the only experience that makes us richer, and so all of my experiences have, made me who I am today. And that real desire to share it with others, and make it more than anything, accessible to everyone has always been my, my dream. And that's really like the inspiration that made FlyWallet come to be. And so what is FlyWallet? FlyWallet is, in the most simple terms, it's a savings account, a dedicated savings account for travel. Users save monthly or weekly, and basically they're building up their wealth so that they can then afford a trip. The Web3 side of things comes into play for that inclusive side, because maybe we'll go deeper into it, but FinTech, I've been building this project for the past 4.5 years. And so self-taught, really the ins and outs of how FinTech can help an industry, how also it can, kind of set limitations. And so my main focus was always to make travel accessible globally. Anyone, no matter where you're from, can actually save and book a trip. But when it comes to finance, you can't really be that global, and I came into the industry really trying to make that happen. So the Web3 element of, making travel affordable and sustainable through Web3 is actually here to explain that making travel affordable and sustainable for everyone, whether you're in Latin America, the US, Europe, anyone can actually save and plan a trip. Because now more than ever, we're all connected and we all have that curiosity and everyone wants to travel, It's not a luxury anymore. And so that's really the gates that I'm really trying to break here. I hope that's a good intro that gives you a good idea of the mission I'm on.
Yeah, amazing. And I think Mateo and I were actually just running a Web3 payments debate for our friends at PPro. And the general consensus was that there's definitely some very strong use cases for Web3. And I really love the idea that, you're thinking of Web3 and cryptocurrency where, markets and geographies, such as Vietnam, even India, parts of Africa, Venezuela, Latin America, are becoming more of these, kind of Web3 crypto economies. So I think that's fantastic. Cool. Okay. So let's kind of get into some broader level topics. And I think we should start off with talking about why FinTech and travel are a match made in heaven. So Tania, let's kick off from your perspective. Why only, or why maybe a year ago, Booking.com kind of said, okay, let's pivot towards thinking about FinTechs and payment technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you first have to start with why FinTech, right? So, FinTech has this incredible possibility of improving financial inclusion, improving financial accessibility for huge swathes of consumers. And that means that we can create new credit opportunities, we can improve affordability, and you can remove those frictions in payments. I think this is what Thomas was saying really resonates with me. This idea of removing frictions, creating that security. And so FinTech is a solution that can be applied to the travel industry in a way that can really help improve those financial frictions throughout that travel process. And it can make that the buying or the selling of those travel products a lot faster, a lot easier, and really crucially, a lot more secure and trustworthy. And so for a company like ours, like Booking.com, what we've really thought through is that we've thought, okay, we're going to make a commitment to financial technology, and we're going to have this dedicated FinTech business unit. Again, now a year old. And since we are this, a global e-commerce company where we are connecting customers and partners all over the world, you need to think about global solutions. And FinTech is a global solution. So FinTech can make those connections easier. It can make it so that our customers and our partners are able to focus on the journey rather than the admin of doing that travel process.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think when you think about the kind of holistic or end-to-end travel experience, there's so many different customer touch points that go over, potentially quite a long period of time. So for example, next summer I want to go to an event in Japan or something. So, I'm starting to maybe think about saving for that trip now, looking to book it now. And then, when you're a few days before you travel, what you need to think about, insurances, as well as, what happens kind of in the flight, booking the hotel and everything. I think there definitely you can kind of map almost every type of banking product to the travel experience. And you know, Thomas, that's surely what you're doing with the savings side of things. So, I mean, from your perspective, why are they kind of a match made in heaven? And I guess why savings? Why are you focusing on kind of the savings aspect?
Yeah, like everything that Tania said, you know, is 100%, you know, I agree with, and it's music to my ears, you know, just really reducing that friction of, you know, that booking experience, making it maybe less intimidating also, because there's this whole other side of things like booking a flight or booking a hotel, booking a trip is known to be a very stressful experience, you know, like once you commit to that amount, you know, like, and it's left your bank account, you know that now the only way to get it back is going to have to deal with the customer service. And so FlyWallet really focusing on the saving side is that making it a joyful planning experience, I think is very important. So, you know, you're saving before, you can take your time. Maybe I want to go to Rio. Maybe I want to go to Tokyo. Let's just put them in my bucket list, you know, let me save the right amount so that I can make it happen. These are pain points that really like the average traveler comes to encounter. And so we're seeing really this huge influx of new travelers, you know, that's happening. Like it used to be a luxury traveling, you know, you had to be rich to travel, you know, and now the stigma of anyone can actually go to Paris or go to London has opened up the gates. And so really accommodating this new demographic is where FinTech has that ability, you know, to make that happen. So focusing on the saving is just really to make everyone part of the conversation, you know. So if you can save as little as, you know, $10 a month, which is ridiculous, but well, I'm sorry, like I have users who save $10 a month, and you know I love them for it, and they maybe have a trip happening in 5 years, but the point is taking that first step, you know. And so being able to capture the potential traveler way before the trip is super important, you know. Like there's the best times, there's actually a study about this, that the best times of a trip, you know, are before it, when you're preparing for it, then you have the trip itself, and then you have after, when you're telling the stories about the trip. And that before and after tend to be like when people's, you know, energy is the highest, then the trip is obviously amazing. But those memories and that joyful planning is where I think FinTech has this ability to make the customer experience very unique. And I'm really approaching it as also a customer, you know, and also as a founder also, but I'm really trying to put the customer first, and FinTech has that amazing ability. But just to touch on that match made in heaven side, you know, we hear everything is a FinTech today. I don't know if you've heard that saying, you know, we went from cash maybe to then cards or checks, and now like FinTech is like really here to innovate the payment experience, because it's always the least, let's say, the most taboo moment in let's say an acquisition cycle. And so the travel industry per se has been one of those industries that hasn't innovated in like forever. I think since the moment we've made it commercial, you know, it hasn't really changed. And so a match made in heaven, I think, is like the timing, you know. I like to define travel as like also like a resident industry, like a bit like cars, you know, and, you know, and restaurants, in the sense that they're part of our culture. Like taking that break in the year or traveling is part of our yearly and our routines. And so making that payment seamless, or making that payment like very natural, or making it part of your budget, for example, this is huge opportunity. And so the travel industry could definitely benefit from FinTech. So it's exciting. I mean, it's definitely can be an example for other industries to adopt, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And Thomas, so how do customers actually how does the savings account work? So how, like from the back end, who are you using to provide the wallet experience?
So before we moved to Web3, we were using a wallet provider out of Luxembourg.
Mm-hmm.
So users would connect their debit cards, and money would be going into an e-money wallet, which is basically safeguarded by this partner bank.
Yep. So
we would be passporting their license to be able to offer this service. They would be required to provide, KYC, etc., in order to pay out. But that global accessibility was very convenient for us in order to enable anyone to connect just the debit cards and save and set a monthly or weekly budget. That's how the funds were saved. Until recently, and due to new, regulations, notably 3DS, 3DS cards, like not every bank in the world or every jurisdiction has this protocol, in place with their banks. And so since it's a European bank, any user who wanted to add funds over a certain amount actually weren't able to anymore, although we were able to customize the limit. And so we moved to Web3 just out of necessity to remain, globally accessible. Our European and American users can continue to use our e-wallet system, which is with partner institutions in the Web2 FinTech space. But if you're from, let's say, mostly maybe emerging markets or, other jurisdictions, we offer a Web3 solution.
Nice. Cool. And I guess, so Tania, Thomas, you both talked about kind of how important FinTech is as a means to innovate in the travel industry. And I think when we think about the FinTech industry, one of the biggest and perhaps most controversial kind of innovations to come out is the whole concept of buy now, pay later. So actually, a few years ago, I was booking a flight to Asia on Turkish Airlines, and I saw at the checkout page they offered Klarna, so I could actually, it was a pretty big ticket item, and the ability to have that option, I think, was amazing. And there's this debate on the role that, like, how buy now, pay later will impact the credit card industry. And when we think about airlines, all the big airlines have a co-branded credit card. I have a Lufthansa co-branded credit card. When I lived in the UK, I had the British Airlines one. So how do we feel about buy now, pay later? Do we think it's kind of going to kind of disrupt the way people pay? What does this mean for like airlines and hotels when they think about co-branded credit cards? Tania, what's your perspective on the rise of buy now, pay later?
Yeah, so Booking.com is now kind of in that discovery phase, and we have enabled buy now, pay later on some of our products and part of our platform. I do think that there's always going to be a time and a place for credit cards and for other sort of local payment methods, but with buy now, pay later, at least in my mind, this is not competition. This should be viewed as complementary. I think FinTech in general, often new innovations in FinTech are always thought as initially as, oh, this is competition. Actually, a lot of these are complementary so that they can, again, provide more choice, more options for users. And of course, there's always going to be a duty of care. And a company like us, we're always putting that at the heart of everything we do, that duty of care. But buy now, pay later as sort of a broader subject, if you will, I think that this is ultimately expanding the way that an individual can pay for their trip. One of the things that you've both said that really resonated with me is that the traveler's first impression starts at that first click, be it the accommodation, the flight, you name it. So if part of your experience is also how you can pay for it and how you can think about controlling your own finances, then buy now, pay later as a vehicle can really help in that checkout process by expanding the choice for an individual. Now, we're fairly agnostic with respect to how we view payment methods. We're not going to say you need to do this or that. We want to allow our customers to really think through what is best for them. So really allowing a customer to have that, that ability to decide what is the right way for paying. But with buy now, pay later, what you have seen already are a number of clear use cases that are existing in the context of travel. We've already seen a number of airlines. We've seen a number of e-commerce travel companies that do offer buy now, pay later or installment plans to their customers. So it is a relatively new financing option, but with travel on the rise, in particular in the context of this, COVID recovery, where we are actually seeing travel increasing kind of on all fronts, buy now, pay later can help as an option that's utilized more and more. within the context of buy now, pay later, it's also important to remember that regulation is going to differ. The manner in which buy now, pay later is approached is going to differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So when we make comments about buy now, pay later more broadly, we need to make sure that we're also measured with respect to where those activities are happening.
Yeah.
For a company like us, we think about it first as how can this create, again, frictionless payment methods that are secure and that enables choice within that space that's already safe. So that's where, for us, it's really important. And I do think that buy now, pay later is on the rise any way you cut it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think that's it's a very fair and I think point is that buy now, pay later will and increasingly will kind of be determined by the various regulations at the market level. So, thinking about buy now, pay later in the UK may be completely different from buy now, pay later in Australia or Germany. But I mean, I think
use cases can be different too. That's the beautiful thing is that the use cases, just beyond travel can be very different depending on the jurisdiction.
Definitely. And Thomas, how does what's your view on buy now, pay later? Because I guess if your product is looking at kind of more that sustainable savings plan, do you buy now, pay later as kind of a competitor to what you're offering, or?
I'm gonna be completely, honest. I'm super anti buy now, pay later, And in our case, we're talking about travel, so maybe we'd talk book now, pay later, just for purposes of the travel industry. But I definitely agree. Although I really agree with Tania, the goal of it is to empower, or to enable people to be able to purchase, in different methods and give that flexibility. But if you really were to describe or define what credit is in as few terms as possible, that would be buy now, pay later, and just it doesn't empower people, it actually traps them, in my perspective. And so the approach that I'm really trying to take here is save now, pay later, like save now. When you have the amount, then spend it on, spend responsibly. Again, I'm a startup, so I'm always, I'm thinking of, how can I really actually then provide value to my users, but also, accompany them, and be there, for them through and throughout. Then, hopefully when we grow, I hope I can keep those, those values intact. But my point being is that book now, pay later, or buy now, pay later, I think that they're never going to really compete, with credit cards until airlines integrate it into themselves. Because as Tania said, they remain a service, or if hotels integrate it themselves, but it remains a service or a payment method. And as long as they're basically operating a different type of user experience when it comes to credit. So instead of using a credit card, I'm using, if I don't have a credit card or I don't have credit, I can go and purchase a flight or a hotel using a buy now, pay later, platform. Is just really innovating the user experience. But at the end of the day, it's still credit, and I don't think that really helps travelers. Like, who wants to go on a trip and pay for it after they come back? I'm using the space to really voice my opinion. This is what we're here for. This is really what I'm trying to put forward. There are people who a vacation is supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to be something that brings joy, and so finance is always the most stressful element. So if you have to go into more debt, to then relax from your previous debt, I think it's like it's a vicious circle that's happening. But that said,
it sounds like what's really, I think this is really interesting. Like, it sounds what's really important to you then is this concept of affordability and appropriateness of the kind of credit that an individual, may or may not be taking. And I think that that's super important, that there's always that appropriateness, that somebody's not being sold a financial product that's inappropriate for them. Because I think that this is the biggest, not just in travel, but more generally with financial technology, this is the biggest debate that we see from policymakers and regulators, but also that you would, have internally. And I think that, your point is accurate that we have to make sure that the products that are marketed more generally are always appropriate. But I think where I would just push back a little is that credit and installments, depending on your jurisdiction, might be viewed in different capacities, and how that product can be utilized by individuals. I think it does become a really personal financial control decision. So I think where what you're saying resonates a lot with me is this idea of being able to control my own finances, but where buy now, pay later, certain buy now, pay later solutions, not all, there are predatory solutions out there for sure. But, done responsibly and with care, I think actually can enable financial control for an individual. Just
Absolutely.
personally, I've used buy now, pay later.
No, of course. I might have come off, a bit too strong because, true story, FlyWallet initially was called Fly Now, and we were operating, actually, we called it Book Now, Pay Later, which was basically you could lock the flight price, lock it for 50%, so the flight price wouldn't go up anymore. And then once you've paid the other 50%, you could then fly. So the buy now is buy now, pay later, but responsibly done in a way where you have to pay everything before the trip, so to go deep into what you're saying, I 100% agree. How it's used or how it's implemented, is extremely important, because you're here to, really provide a service. And so that ability to, if you know which dates you're going to travel and when it is, and you want to secure it right now, but you don't have, let's say, the cash flow to, secure it. In that case, buy now, pay later or book now, pay later are, excellent tools. And actually, well, on a business standpoint, I had to kind of cap it because then it requires, a certain treasury so that because you're kind of fronting that, you're fronting this cash, to book. And so as a startup, it wasn't that sustainable. So we moved to save now, pay later. But it's the right way to go. It's empowering more travelers, and that's what the travel industry is now has to do, to bring more people into the space.
Totally. It's
make
accessibility.
It more inclusive. Accessibility, exactly. Accessibility. So it's it just has to be done responsibly. I can tell, Tania, you're very responsible. You got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's definitely coming out is, again, kind of giving customers as many options and accessible and responsible ways to plan and pay for their, vacation. Because, I mean, one thing that actually that I find very interesting with this whole kind of buy now, pay later aspect is actually I was working for a client that is a credit card issuer that is offering a post-transaction buy now, pay later product. So now we're starting to see, is that credit on credit? Is that very predatory, or is that a good thing? Because then, it allows users that may, have all of a sudden been whacked with a big tax bill, be able to free up some capital. They may use a buy now, pay later product or service, once every 5 years or once in their lifetime or something. So I think definitely giving customers that choice. And I think, while credit cards and credit products have always been the norm, I think, Thomas, it is so refreshing to see a dedicated savings product. I think, one of a very strong use case across many different customer segments, but I think specifically within the freelancer, the digital nomad, the creative segment, a really big up and coming, segment, and thinking about new ways of working is, I'm a freelancer. I enjoy flexibility. I want to save for a 6 months around the world trip. So, empowering people to save rather than just giving them kind of the easy solution when it comes to credit.
Yep.
What's cool is that it's not just those credit products, but there's also, I think Thomas has touched upon it already, but price guarantees, price locks, pay in your own currency. These are all things that at least we're looking at really seriously, because these are ways that financial technology solutions can be applied to that checkout experience that can make it easier. It can give you more control. That can expand that choice. And in the context of travel, we're seeing not just us, but more broadly, you're seeing the travel industry and accommodations looking at those innovations more and more. How do we make this more equitable? How do we make this more affordable?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the concept of price lock-ins, is this something new in the industry? I mean, Thomas, you said that you kind of started off looking at price lock-ins. So like, what is the history and evolution of price lock-ins? Where do we see it going? Thomas, what's your views on the price lock-in?
I mean, it's for a traveler, being able to lock the price. Everyone knows the longer you wait until the departure, the price is going to go up. This is like a standard knowledge for anyone who's going to book a flight. So the ability to lock it beforehand, is a huge value add for any first-time traveler or a regular traveler. You just have that fixed rate, and then you know what you can expect, and also it takes away that stress, oh, I have to go again. It's the user experience, being able to accommodate everyone. Like, oh, the flight is super cheap right now in August for December, but I have to pay my rent. Let me, I have to then pay. Maybe let me save up this month, sacrifice some pleasures this month, and then in September I have enough to book it. But then the flight price will be above. Flight locking is, like I mentioned, what was my first, what first came into my mind when it was like, how can we make travel more inclusive and more accessible? Is flight locking. And that can only be done through Book Now, Pay Later. We're seeing it in certain projects, they're offering it. And I have faith in it. I think that if the travel industry, in terms of its distribution, in terms of its pricing, economics, manages to be on the same page in a certain way, like this is like very utopian thinking, if we know what we know the travel industry as it is. But if they manage to actually uniform a bit, like they say the routes, and maybe the pricings, and see it as a long term, because travel I don't think is going anywhere. Price locking could change the game completely. I mean, a year ahead, like they could actually create like an average set price for every flight, every route, and I think that all the margins would be met, and everyone would benefit from it. But I definitely believe in that service. Price locking is here to stay. It just has to be integrated properly.
Definitely.
I just really want to mention Booking.com. Like I also use Booking.com because that pay at the property, where you can like book it, and then pay at the property is like a huge, it's so comforting, it's a huge relief. So locking it is like just on the user experience level is a huge value. There's no question about it. And it definitely threads with, InsurTech, insurance, which in terms of like the synergies between, flight locking prices and, insurance, that we have to find like a good middle ground for those two to work. Because if at the last minute the flight gets cancelled, as you mentioned, Tania, or you can't go anymore, the flight locking is good only so much. And one compromise that we actually offered when we did Book Now, Pay Later at the time was that to providing the service of locking the flight, that first 50% that you kind of used to lock the price, and then you had to pay the rest before the departure, but was basically non-refundable. Mm-hmm. That way, with insurance companies, we could maybe ask for a 50% refund, which, is more. And that way, as a business, we didn't incur any significant losses, but making the user accountable, just like with booking, if you don't cancel 48 hours or 24 hours before, you're going to get charged. And that responsibility, we can only assist travelers so much. We want to assist them as much as we can, accommodate them as much as we can, but they have to also be accountable. And I think that's where we create a deeper relationship with them.
That relationship part is really important. I mean, at Booking, we have our rewards program, and what's really amazing is that you do see how people are, if we're loyal to you, they'll be loyal to us as well. And I think that if you can give them that good experience, and we're all being quite realistic about everyone's expectations. That's why when we do have these options, we make it really clear. This is what it means. This is how you can utilize this. And I think that engenders trust, and that trust component is so crucial in the travel experience or the accommodations experience. I think what's nice is that I think not just for Booking, but more broadly, people within the travel space are thinking about trust much more and providing that respect back to their customer. That has to be a part of the conversation when you're thinking about financial technology for e-commerce, embedded finance, whatever. But that piece has to be super important. And I think that is a trend that we're seeing, actually, not just with us, but broadly speaking.
I think it'd be good to maybe then, I think this segues nicely into kind of the future and what the future holds. So I think I think this would be a good last question. If we were to kind of reconvene in 5 years' time, what are the three big changes, new products, new experiences, new ways of thinking about travel that will be kind of our points of discussion in 5 years' time? Thomas, what do you think?
To give it, I know that we're approaching the time, so I want to give it just a couple seconds of thought. But I think loyalty programs with brands is definitely a space that will evolve. Again, it's segueing off of the relationship with the customer. But today we see that in travel, just the more you travel, the more rewards that you get. But I think that the future customer isn't going to choose by airline. It's mostly maybe going to choose by type of travel. Like sustainable travel, or leisure travel, hotels. Like it's going to be definitely more holistic. The travel experience is going to be holistic from the type of travel that we want to be or that we like to do, and from beginning to end, from pre-booking, so the saving side, to planning it, to booking, to experiencing the airport experience. The airport experience is definitely, I hope, in the next 5-10 years is going to improve. And then that post trip experiences are going to be ironed out.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to talk in ways of how, I guess, how impactful, how we can travel responsibly, how it's important for our mental health, or, our planet. It's going to take the conversation is going to get way deeper, I think. But right now, FinTech is one step towards that. And I believe that, smoothing out the booking experience with FinTech is a must, no matter what.
Good.
Yeah.
Tania, does that resonate with your views of the future?
It does. I almost think that there's sort of three key areas. The first is definitely this trust piece that Thomas is saying, really thinking about and I think trust is also part of the loyalty and rewards. So how do we reward people for trusting in us and providing a service to them? How do we make sure that they feel secure, safe, and not just the traveler, but also our partners, also the different businesses, the B2B side as well. So I think where I see FinTech and travel evolving, it's really being quite much closer in that trust piece. I think the second is actually, oddly enough, travel itself. So, in the context of a global pandemic or, other things that are happening in the world, we are a global company. And we're committed to making those international connections easier and safer. And what we are seeing is that customers are not just doing those international travels, but they're also traveling domestically. And your experience, either international or domestic, at least from that admin perspective, should be easy, should be painless. And so where I think that we see FinTech going is really actually that really focusing on that creating solutions piece that would help us understand how to facilitate those seamless payments that are suitable for an international or for a domestic traveler, be it an international traveler that needs to pay in their own currency, or how that's received by a merchant. And I think the last thing, quite honestly, just to focus in on that payment piece, because it is what we're seeing, and it's a little bit what you guys have already talked about, is, the tokenization and merchant initiated transactions piece. How do we make sure that an individual can securely make that payment in a really easy, fast way? So authenticating once, being able to choose how you pay and maybe reuse that payment information. That's, I think, the next big innovation. It's going to be to borrow like a phrase that we've seen from the OECD and to borrow from a phrase that the UN sort of World Travel Organization has said a lot, is that last mile digitalization. And I think that's where we're going to see big strides, not just in travel, but e-commerce more generally. That's what I think will become much more easy, be it at the check-in at your hotel or the check-in at your flight, that you'll start to see that last piece becoming a lot easier and more integrated. And I think that that's something that Booking.com and a lot of our colleagues in the travel space are hoping to work towards, make this process easier, faster, and safer.
Yeah. Sounds like we could be moving towards a big travel super app one day. Maybe.
Yeah. And it'll have a loyalty program.
Yeah, of course. And you can pay in fiat or crypto. You can save. You can take it from your micro savings, your buy now, pay later if you want, your credit card. So I think,
Spend on experiences, not things.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I mean, this has been an incredibly interesting and fun talk about kind of all things travel. And it was really interesting to kind of get two perspective on things like buy now, pay later, hear the kind of incumbent perspective, the startup perspective, get insights into how, we touched briefly upon, the Web3 use case when it comes to travel. But I think we're all in agreement that FinTech is definitely will be a catalyst for innovation in the travel industry. It's absolutely needed, and making the experiences as seamless and flexible and smooth as possible for customers when it comes to all touch points on travel, because I think we can all agree now with all the kind of crazy stories we're hearing about traveling at the moment, any kind of, seamless, nice, flexible experiences for customers will be very welcome, definitely after the summer of travel, I think. So,
this was fun. This was great. Meaghan, by the way, amazing host. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Totally
it was a pleasure.
Yeah, this was really interesting. I hope we can do this again in a year and see how quickly innovation has spread to the travel industry. So yeah, listeners, this was Breaking Banks Europe, episode 139. Thomas, where can our listeners find out more about FlyWallet? How can they sign up and start saving for their next trip?
FlyWallet.io is the website. You should be able to start saving in less than 2 minutes. That's what we pride ourselves on. I appreciate, follow on LinkedIn, FlyWallet, or Twitter, fly_wallet. That's where we are most active. And then Instagram and TikTok, those also FlyWallet. But yeah, anything, you can always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or by email. Always happy to meet aspiring travelers and travel FinTech enthusiasts.
Super. And Tania, Booking.com is Booking.com. So
that's right. And on Booking.com, you can find stays, flights, your flight and your hotel, your car rental, your experiences, lots of different ways in which you can experience travel, be it business or pleasure. So please visit us. And it was really a pleasure to be here with you, and safe travels, everyone.
Yeah, safe travels.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I hope for our listeners, this has really inspired you to start, thinking more about how FinTech can really empower both businesses and consumers when it comes to all things traveling. So thank you again to my guests, and stay tuned for the next episode of Breaking Banks Europe.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.